I think they want access to the screen. Okay. Okay.
Palestinians are causing trouble already.
So now some access to the screen then. So sharing your host.
You're going to change the hosting, yeah. People don't know we're working with Africa Islamic Economic Foundation. They're based in Ghana, their head office. So very good collaboration. They're hosting the technical side. I'm testing that because I think the future is going to be Africa. I don't want to say why, but that's another discussion. So am I coming on the screen, Baba Yunus? Can you hear me, Clive?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Right, go on, carry on. You can speak. What are you saying?
Right, well...
Yeah, Hussein is back, so you can have access to the screen, please.
Yeah, okay.
You want to put
yeah, Hussein?
Ask him if he can mute himself.
I'm here.
Yeah, hi, Hussein. Yeah, we were waiting for you. Can you put me on the screen first? And then, yeah, I'm just speaking to Clive.
You actually on the screen. You want me to spotlight you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, usually it's full screen. It says, it's just got the logo. It's just got the logo of the AFRIF in his screen.
Oh, okay. So
okay, that's better.
Are you okay now?
I believe me, guys, this is not deliberate. I'm looking digital. It wasn't planned, but there you go. Expect the unexpected in eschatology. So what I was saying, Clive, over to you. What were you saying?
Yeah, I was just saying that it would be useful if everyone could point to something that is reference that actually summarizes their work. I know Ben has done that from last time.
Yeah.
But it would just be very useful to get a sort of summary of how they got to where they've got to.
You're talking about people's intellectual evolution.
Well, yeah, they've come to a certain position which they presented today.
Yeah.
Either they relied on some very important sources, which would be good to know, or they've summarized their journey in some way on a website or something that we can study after the event.
You want them to send it to me and you want to get it. Is that what you're saying?
Share it amongst ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I mean, after this is done, yes, of course, we will discuss the follow-up. I'll have a word with you.
You can put it in the chat. Put it in the chat.
Yeah, that might be better. So whilst we're hearing the presentations, everyone, yeah.
The chat disappears and nobody looks at it. It probably needs to be circulated by email.
Yeah. Well, okay. We'll come back to that. We will come back to that. Yeah. Thanks, Clive. Yeah.
Yeah, they've got Zoom fixed so that you can't copy the chat now.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, yeah. You're right. Skype is going to die and been taken over by, was it Microsoft? Can't remember. Zoom or Microsoft. Right. Okay. So, Dr. Khaled, are you there? Are you in your office? Not yet. Right. Anyway, what was I saying? I was introducing the sequence. Okay. So the sequence is going to be Rabbi Benjamin Abrahamson, who is currently speaking to us from Jerusalem. Is going to be the signs of the hour and the Messiah, obviously. But I've asked him, I've requested him to put Jerusalem in his presentation for obvious reasons today. And then we have got a surprise. We got Dr. Khaled Al-Awesi from Ankara University. He teaches Jerusalem studies in the capital of Turkey. And he's also got an organization on Jerusalem studies for global, global advocacy or understanding. So he, as far as I know, he is Palestinian from Hebron, and he has done his studies, or some of them, in the UK. So he's got strong UK connections. And then we have got a speaker from Pakistan. There was meant to be two, but we got Dr. Muzamil Thakur on the Zionist Hindutva nexus, which will be fascinating. The other two speakers, who knows? They might come, they might not, but that will give us freedom for Q&A. Okay, I'm going to go off the screen, and please introduce yourself, Rabbi. Let me see, Hussein? Can you hear me, Hussein? What is it? Hussein? Baba Yunus, you there? Our connection with Ghana. They're on his screen, but he can't, he's muted. Hello, Hussein, Baba Yunus.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, we're waiting. Right, okay, we're going to start this session. Session 2 commences with Rabbi Benjamin Abrahamson. So the spotlight should be him on the screen now, yeah? You got him?
Okay. That's okay.
So that's the one that says Ben Abrahamson. You got that one?
Yes, I think. So, okay, he's on the spotlight now. So I will have to remove you. Let me remove you first.
Yeah, he's just about to join us. Dr. Khalid Alwisi. We just wait a second. He says, just got into my office. If you just wait for 1 minute, is that okay, Rabbi Benjamin?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I want to make sure he is fully on board and listening. So great. So what's the weather like in Jerusalem, by the way, whilst we wait for him?
It's sunny and dry, as like it is this time of year, and they get a little bit warm.
Good. And what part of Jerusalem are you in?
Near the old city. I'm what do you call it? On Jaffa, off of Jaffa Street, which is the main street that goes from the Jaffa Gate to the old city.
Yes, amazing. Yeah. You're very lucky, because it's a amazing city. Based on my latest research, video research, Jerusalem's linkage. Jerusalem was a Qibla of Islam, original Islam.
Mm-hmm.
So and the connectivity with the heavens, heaven and earth. Yeah. I think you also believe in that, yeah. The connectivity. Yeah. Between is just profound, mind-boggling. So, okay, Khalid, you there? Yeah, as soon as he's on the screen, we'll commence. I think it's just about. So that's 3 speakers. By the way, everyone, that was great collaboration. Very good, excellent presentations, and yeah, lot to get into. Let me see.
Yeah.
You have got a big library there. Is that a library or what?
It's just a place by where I work. There are lots of. It's a school library, university library.
Which university?
Hebrew University.
Yeah, that's got an amazing history. I've heard about it. Yeah.
It's on Mount Scopus. There's 2. Jerusalem sits exactly on 2 hills. One is Moriah and Mount Scopus, and you find in Arabic you have the same in Makkah. You also have Safa and Marwa.
Yes.
The names correspond to Moriah, Marwa, Scopus,
right.
Tophet, and Safa. And actually, if you look at a map and you look at the exact correlations between them, they're the same geographic location.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Right, okay. So basically, if you can introduce yourself, let's start. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. So just to remind everyone, we are starting, I am starting in the name of Allah, the most gracious and merciful, and I also seek refuge from the satanic forces. So please introduce yourself as you wish, Rabbi Benjamin Abramson, and a warm welcome by Global Vision.
There's only one God.
This has been recorded.
There's only one God, only one Allah. So it's all for all of us. We should all seek refuge.
Yes.
And,
well, over to you. You're most welcome. This has been recorded, inshallah, on YouTube. Yeah. So you can introduce yourself. Thank you.
My name is Ben Abramson. I usually refer to myself as a religious historian, a rabbinical historian. What that means is historians, I try to reconstruct different portions of history, but being rabbinical, I take into account religious history as credible, and not just Jewish religious history, but also history and Byzantine religious history and that kind of thing. I'm the founder of the Institute, which is an institution of Muslim and rabbinic scholars of history and law. And our research is mostly historical. It's not theological and it's not political. Although almost everybody involved is very religious. The focus is to connect traditional religious teachings with a more broader, inclusive, which I might say scholarly historical narrative. In two sentences, I'd like to present in these 30 minutes how Jewish, Christian, and Muslim eschatological visions can be understood not as conflicting ideas of what's going to happen, but as complementary paths within a divine framework. We're definitely in a time of transition. And you know, when God created the world, he gave each nation, a special mission, something to do. And at the beginning, everybody was just doing their own thing, and they got wiped out by a flood. And then you had a dictator, Nimrod, came and tried to bring everybody together to declare war on God. And all those things failed. And we're at a time now where people have to learn to work together. They have to learn to share. Rabbi Sachs, Jonathan Sachs of London said it very beautifully. He said that every nation was given something that another nation needed. And each nation needed something that another nation had. And what we need to do now is to transition how we transact with each other. We have to move away from force and violence and move to love and sharing. We have to work together and share what each person has. Violence or anything like that.
What's the title of your presentation, just so we're all clear?
I left it the same title, Signs of the Hour and the Messiah, but I put, I'll talk more about Jerusalem, and at the end I added a section about how the Orthodox view Zionism.
Okay, over to you. Be relaxed, you got plenty of time. If it goes even beyond 30, no problem, because it's quite unique. Okay, thank you.
I mean, the bottom line of what I'm trying to present is to have peace in the Middle East or anywhere. You have to have justice, and in order to have justice, you can be a bunch of interfaith people all getting along, having dinners together, or even some humanist conference. But when somebody breaks a window or somebody runs a stoplight, I mean, you need to have a system to deal with things like that. So justice comes through trust, and trust will only come through recognition, encouragement, and support of all the people involved as equal partners in the service of humanity to God. Okay, so with that, I'll bring up my my paper. Let me see if I can do that here.
If I may say so, your last paper, as I said, was groundbreaking about the two messiahs. I'm still coming to terms.
I'll conclude it. Just a little note here. I just finished. I'm probably the only rabbi who's published a copy of the Quran. I just finished now.
Wow!
well,
can you repeat what you said? What did you say? You're the only what?
I'm the only rabbi in the world who published the Quran, I believe.
In which language?
Oh, in English. In English. You can see it on Amazon.
Amazing, amazing.
It's a study Bible. It's a word for word translation made for people who are not familiar with Arabic to be able to look at language family word families by looking at the roots. And it's written in English letters. But what I have here on the screen here is I just finished this. I just published it 2 weeks ago. Was a 34-volume translation of 8 of the most important commentaries on the Quran, including Al-Tabari, Ibn Kathir, and a bunch of ones. And 7 of these have never been translated to English before. So it wants to see what the early Islamic scholars said in the first 2 centuries of Islam. You know, here's a simple translation, nothing special about it. But if Arabic's an obstacle, here's a way to get over that. Anyway, so let me get.
Fantastic, yes. And so, how many languages do you know? Sorry for the interruption, guys. How many languages do you know? Just so the people.
Well, I speak English, Hebrew. I know Yiddish, German. I can get by in French and a little bit of Russian, but and also Aramaic I know from literature, and then Arabic I also know. So.
Okay, great.
Okay, I'll put on the chat here the copy. Wait, if I can copy it here. This is the if anybody wants to copy it, it's the link to my presentation that I made last time, which is basically what I'm going to do now, but change the emphasis a little bit. It's called Signs of the Hour. The context of everything that I'm saying here is the idea we're living in a time of transition. Since the Industrial Age, there's been conflicts between science and religion, and there's been conflicts among religions, and even within religions there's been conflicts. And lately this has been leading to a breakdown in trust in social institutions. So most people, Rabbi Ben-Amazeg, he's the scholar that basically he lived 200 years ago, 150 years ago, and it's his school of thought that we follow in this Orthodox organization, at least the Orthodox Jews. Then we have so Sunni and Shia scholars as well. But Rabbi Ben-Amazeg pointed out that the conflict between religion and science has become such a great state. And there's so much that it brings out into relief the antagonism between religions. The advances in technology have brought with them such enormous economic and military advantage that the conflicts with religion have been seemed like they're like endless squabbling, and it's made people who would normally be trying to advance humanity distancing themselves from religion and being disgusted with it. So that's one problem we have to deal with. Another problem is the conflict between the religion and even within religions. There's the idea of exclusive salvation, that everybody's got one path, they got their own God, and it's the path to salvation, and that's it. There's no other path. And that's not the Jewish view. It's not the view of the Torah. The Torah views that there's only one God for everybody, no matter who he is. An Indian, Baha'i, Buddhist, whatever, there is only one God in the world. There is no other power. He may have an incomplete or even distorted view of it, but it's all the same God. So there's really no reason why there should be conflicts and say, I've got the Muslim God and you've got the Jewish God. I mean, there's no such thing. It's all the same thing. So so there should be, everybody understands this divinity, but there's a lot of conflict going on because of exclusive salvation and supersessionism. And the third problem we have is the base nature of men. People left to their own devices are evil. They like to go wherever satisfies their needs.
You haven't spotted any evil in the Palestinians.
What? Even the Palestinians? What do you? Wait a second. You're moving to politics. I'm talking about in general, mankind.
James, we will have a question and answer session. Our format is let the speaker speak. Okay, carry on. We will have a Q&A session. Carry on.
Okay. So we have the base nature of man. So that's the third problem we have. And so what I mentioned here, and I think Mohsin, you mentioned this earlier in the opening, that what we're seeing here is in this place of conflict between religions and conflict between humanism and science and religion, we see a corrupted religion being born. It's a religion that requires no submission to God. There are great medical advantages that are claimed by the blind and revive people who have, bring them back from near-death experiences. But it's all done, it says freedom and rights and everything, but they leave out the word under God. There's no God involved. I said the priests are stream lives on TikTok and YouTube, and their holy cities are Hollywood and Bollywood and Akihabara, the anime capital of the world. So when we read about the end times and the evil which is coming, in Judaism, at least from an Orthodox point of view, it's never between religions. It's between people who submit to God and people who don't submit to God. And in essence, this is also the Christian view and also the Islamic view. You're not fighting a secular battle. It's a battle between the people who are going to an idealistic view of mankind going forward, reaching for the spiritual, versus the people who, this is the end times view, it's a conflict between the people who are reaching for something greater and the people who are satisfied just in meeting their own immediate needs. Okay. Let's talk about eschatology in general. In Judaism, the most fundamental point of the most fundamental teaching, the parable. And a parable is where you take one story and you tie it together with another story, and then by working through the different aspects of it, you can see how you can learn one from the other. So I mentioned here, prophecy is a set of analogies which you can stretch to many different situations and circumstances. A prophecy should be valuable not just in what's going to happen at the end of the world, but it should also be, what applies to me. Abraham, who opened his tent to visit, for angels to come to him, he was supposed to visit. And this teaches us, it's a parable teaching us giving to others. We should emulate the prophets, the patriarchs. And this is almost an aspect of cognitive psychology, that anything you can think about has a beginning, a middle, and an end. A cup has a middle, and an end. A computer screen has a beginning, middle, and end. And if you can trace the beginning of one thing, the beginning of the other, and the end of the other, you can. And when we do this with Torah, when we apply Torah in our life, or I should say Scripture, all Scripture, we believe that there's a supernal Scripture that came down, in 70 different languages, and the Torah is the one, that the Jewish children of Israel learn. There is a period, a set of, whenever you're going through a story, there's the aspect of an introduction, like exposition, introduction, action, climax, following actions, denouement, or resolution. A story has a certain process that goes through. And this can be in a person's life, and it can be in a person's day, or it can be in the entire scope of the entire world. There's a period of climax and doing. If a person is going to build a house, he's first got to decide, what does he want the house for? He wants to live in it. And then in order to live in it, he wants rooms. In order to get rooms, you need hallways to get from room to this. And when you get the rooms and the hallways together, you have a blueprint. And then you go out to get the workers. And then you have to pay them. And you work it out, and you get a budget. And then after you get a budget, you need the people with talents, and then you need the resources. But when it all comes down to it, you get all this together, and you have to do the work. You have to build the house. And then after that, you live in it. We're at the point in the history of mankind of the doing. We've been given the resources. We've been given before us, but we have a whole bunch of facts, a bunch of history lessons, which we can draw from, and mistakes we don't have to make a second time. And like Rabbi Sachs said, there's something that every nation has that we need, and something that they have that we need, and we have to develop a spiritual commerce, a way of working together, so that we'll do this in the way that God had intended us to do from the time of the Garden of Eden. So here, let me go on here. So in the Jewish scriptures called the Tanakh, which includes the Torah, the Nevi'im, which are the prophets, and the Ketuvim, which is the writings. This scripture, there are many different things people are probably familiar with in Deuteronomy, Numbers, Isaiah, Jeremiah, all talking about Israel and the what do you call it, the nations of the world, and how they're all coming together in the end of times, and it's supposed to be a good ending. In Isaiah, in the prophets, it says that the lion and the child will walk together without any fear. A lion and a lamb. There will be no violence in the golden age. Why won't there be? There'll still be lions, there'll still be lambs, there'll still be children. Everything's going to be there. What's going to change is the relationship between them. We don't believe that there's any monotheist doesn't believe that there's two gods. Chas v'shalom. Allah should be above us. There's not a good God and a bad God. There's one God, and everything He's given to us is ultimately for the good. What happens is it gets mixed up sometimes, and it gets mixed around the wrong way, and it's our job to tend the garden, tend the Garden of Eden, to straighten that out, to put things in the right order. So let me talk here. As far as eschatology goes, in the paper I discuss about Daniel. I talk about the weeks of Daniel. But what's more interesting is, let's get to Genesis. One thing that's interesting is in Judaism, the word Messiah Mashiach is like, it's a title, it's not a name. It's like Navi or prophet. Just as a prophet speaks the word of God, a Messiah is a person who does the word of God. And that's why you find in the Torah it talks about Cyrus, who wasn't even Jewish. It was he was called Messiah. A high priest can be called Messiah. David was called Messiah. So we have different people who have earned the title of Messiah. And we say there will be at the end of days, there'll be a Messiah like King David. And we're also taught there was a Messiah, a suffering Messiah, who was like Joseph, who the story of Joseph described what he went through. He was rejected by his brothers. He was put into slavery. He was raised to great heights. He was hidden, occultated from his brothers. They didn't see him right away, but all this time he was working to help them, and eventually revealed himself. And our teachings say that revelation is the secret to the redemption of all mankind. So that's about the suffering Messiah. About the King Messiah, we believe that he'll come and bring, not through violence, but through the word of his mouth, through his teachings. He'll rectify these misunderstandings, these differences between people, and he'll explain what the differences were, why people were different, why they had difference in the way they were living their lives, what they thought the purpose of life was. So this Messiah will bring about prosperity. He'll bring all people to the knowledge of God. And if you look at all the predictions about the King Messiah or Shiloh or whatever the name is used in the Torah, and then also compare that with the you'll find that the expectations can only be fulfilled by the same. It's got to be the same person. So, we're perfectly fine with with Al Mahdi or King Messiah, who God's representative, being sent to bring about peace in the world. Now there is another person called the Antichrist, or the Dajjal, or Armalis in Hebrew terms, and I'll explain a little bit about that. But his whole idea is deception, and the idea of working together and sharing and having a spiritual commerce is exactly what he wants to thwart. He doesn't want people to get along. He wants war. He wants distrust. He wants slander, gossip, and war. And he wants nothing more than to see people raise up in arms and fight each other. And the prophets say in the end times will turn the sword into a plowshare. You know, that will something that was taking away life will be turned to give life. So basically, the entire eschatological view of Judaism is often thought as coming from the prophets, but in actuality, it comes from Genesis, where the 7-day cycle of Genesis, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, the Sabbath, course is a paradigm for all of humanity. It can be stretched to a person's lifetime. It can be stretched to all of humanity. The Talmud makes a comment. One of the many theories it has that a day is like 1,000 years. So they say it's like 6,000 years. So we're up to year 5785, which is less than 300 years away from that. So by one accounting, we're getting close to the time when things will get into the golden age. But a key thing to understand here is that you won't find the term Jew written in the Torah. The Torah is not isn't describing the religion of one people. It's describing the religion of mankind, of all the people, of all humanity. It encompasses all religions. And what you have is one specific faith which all humanity is required to take, to keep, and that's we call the law of Noah, or you can call it the law of Adam. It's to believe in one God, or a center point, a center cause. Obligations before God, treat each other with respect and dignity as equals, and one law. And this one law means not that there's one law applied to everybody. It means basically when you dig way down, that you have to trust others, that they are also seeking justice. And by that you can have international law, and you can seek to deal with problems that even span communities. So I actually go through here in the page, going through each section in Genesis, talking about one man, one God. We see that when there was no relationship between the mankind, it ended with death, as Cain killed Abel. What was going on with the sacrifices there? And we see that he developed musical instruments. It was another nation that developed great buildings. Each nation has to develop itself and bring its own potential to the greatest point that it can. And we're not talking about just the Jewish people. We're talking about all mankind. Each nation, each ummah has a purpose. God could have created us one people, everybody a copy of everybody else, a clone of everybody else, but he didn't. He gave some people who like to live in warm climates, some people like to live in cooler climates, some people are interested in great cathedrals, some people that are interested in great speeches, and even within a community, you have people that are on various points on this spectrum. And what he wants is for us to get along together. It's like actually there's a Quranic verse that says God could have created us as one nation, one ummah, with one law, but he wants to test us and that we should have a race for virtue. So we see here that in Genesis, each nation was given something that another nation needed. When they try to do it through a discipline and a monolithic dictatorship, and created the Tower of Babel, God dispersed them and gave them different languages so that we would have to be different, and we'd have to overcome that difference in a proper way and not in an improper way. So Abraham, to function together properly as mankind, needs to act as Adam, because we're basically all descended. We believe that we're all descended from a single point, and all of Adam's limbs differed, greatly different, an arm, head, this. But all the nations of the world have to work together like a global family. We have to show the path of cooperation. In order to show the path of cooperation without violence, God, found a prototype of the caring, righteous man, Abraham, and he was held up, at least in the Abrahamic tradition, as a perfect prototype, a perfect example of an ideal we can strive for. And then to go beyond this, prototypical family of Jacob was also discussed a lot in the Torah. He had 12 children, and eventually those children became Kohen and Levites and priests. And each tribe in the 12 tribes was different, had different customs. They would marry among their own groups. But this idea of having 12 tribes together under one community was, the children of Jacob was a message, at least in the Torah, that could benefit all of mankind. And the idea is that what does it mean for the Jew to be light to the nation? From the Torah of unity within diversity, not everything else, but submitter, which you might call Islam with a small I. In all our literature, we call we call this Jew, but in the sense that the Talmud says in Megillah that anyone who denies idolatry, it has the term Jew. So this means in everywhere in all our apocalyptic visions, any of the prophecies of the end time, when it talks about Jew or Israel, what it really means is all believers, and we believe that there are many, many believers, many, many prophets were sent to the nations besides just the children of Israel. And each nation has its own purpose and mission. For instance, the people of the desert, their message is they've been entrusted with God to teach people the importance of hospitality. I mean, there it's a life or death situation. Also, the people of the desert, recognize the importance of going beyond themselves and not being limited by borders. A lot of times, especially in the Western tradition, you're so tied up with what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do that injustice can occur, and people will keep their mouth shut. They won't say anything. But the people that in the Torah concept go beyond this. There are no borders. If there is injustice, you go and do it. And this is a special mission for them. And then you have another group of people who were philosophers and delved into the mysteries of knowledge and the universe. And all those are different paths, but they're all qualities. We talk about the 100 or more names of God. All of them are special. All of them point to the same one, but each nation has been entrusted or identifies or feels special about one of those names, and is pushing that forward. And by having the spiritual commerce, for instance, Jews have to learn from Muslims, this idea what talking before about the concept of the desert of not being restricted when you see an injustice to speak out about it, and the Jews should not. I mean, it says that Esau, one of the children of Abraham, he was the brother of Jacob. He was expert at the art of war, and it says that even Jacob. I was just 2 weeks ago in Hebron myself, and according to our tradition, not only Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are there, and everybody else, but also even Esau is there, and even a nation which is this Edom, which was Esau's grandson, described negatively in the Torah, and even called Amalek, is described that had a culture that had to be wiped out. There's still good there. In fact, the idea Rashi says that if, as far as Amalek goes, it's a culture. If what has to be erased is the rebelling against God, the immorality, and the killing without justice, that culture has to be erased. And Rashi says, well, just convert to monotheism and you'll be out of it. You're not going to be Amalek anymore. In fact, some of the greatest rabbis, Rabbi Akiva, who was said to have known the entire Torah and everything, and saved it from early days during a Roman persecution, was said to be a descendant of this. So we'll go on here. Going through Genesis, you read about Bilam. Bilam in the Torah is said about having one eye and walking with a limp. Basically, this is the core root concept of the Dajjal or the Antichrist. Why do they say the one eye? Who said why? Because he only judges by looking at one side of the of events. There's no justice. The Greek name Armalus is similar to what in Masechet Sanhedrin it talks about Bil'am, a nation, a person which destroys covenants. He wants to break the contact between people. He wants people to fight with each other. He doesn't want a federalism, a federation of people working together, complementing each other. He wants each nation to say, I'm the best, I'm the greatest, I've got the one ring, I'm going to go ahead. Okay, so that's the Dajjal. Gog and Magog, that corresponds to the battles with Amalek. Then you also have the story of Joseph going into Egypt. The breaking of family bonds, but uniting them all together, bringing about the essential salvation of his family, and by analogy, the entire world. It's when all of us come to the point of Ani Yosef, is my father still alive? When you come to that revelation, when that happens between the Muslims, the Jews, the Christians, the Buddhists, the Hindus, when you say, I've got something to offer, maybe I don't understand to offer you, and you've got something to offer me. When we reach that point, it'll be this fire or smoke, or signs in the moon or the sun or darkness. If you drill down, and then you're getting back to the plagues in Egypt. Aaron, Elijah, these are peacemakers. One thing to mention here, we talk about all believers in the Torah are called the God-fearers, and the word in Hebrew is Yirei Shamayim, somebody who fears God, fear of heaven. They submit to heaven. And in the Greek, in the New Testament, they're called Sabomai or Theosebea. He would refer to these people, he'd call them Muslimai or Salamai. So here we have, for the beginning of Islam, is already calling believers Muslims. And that could explain, there's a Quranic verse that said, when some of the people heard the Quran being spoken, they said, we were Muslims even before it came. This is the word of God, that we were Muslims before they came. So the key expectation when David and Solomon, the Messiah of David, comes, universal justice, spiritual revival, global peace and prosperity, moral and ethical reformation, unity of believers, divine guidance, harmony with nature, restoration of true faith. Go explain that. As I said before, basically, if you look at anything talking about in Islam and Al-Mahdi, you're looking at the same expectations. And also in Christianity, it's a little bit less. It's not quite as brought out in the Book of Revelation, but it has similar concepts. Talk about Antiochus, Persian conquest. A lot of the Islamic Hadith, a lot of the Midrash, rabbinic Midrash, talk about the end times in terms of the events that happened during the Persian conquest of Jerusalem in 614. But I won't get into that now. You can read more of it online. Let me talk about the state of Israel. Okay, in the Torah, there's a section. Wait, what is that here? Yeah, in the Torah, there's a section in Deuteronomy that talks about the blessings and the curses. What will happen if the children of Israel follow God, or what happens if they don't follow God? And in it, there in Deuteronomy 28, 36, and 64, there's discusses about two exiles. The first was about Nebuchadnezzar, which we believe referred to when the first temple was destroyed. And I bring in my book some Islamic and rabbinic sources behind that. And Zechariah says, as a confirmation, comfort, there'll be return from this first exile when you return to God. And there was also a second exile when the Romans destroyed the temple, and it hasn't been rebuilt since then. And it says there, "Return to me, and I will return to you." Okay, the whole verse in Zechariah says, "The Lord was wroth with your fathers; he provoked me. But so said the Lord of hosts, return to me, and I return to you. I have returned you to Jerusalem with mercy. My house shall be built there, and a plumb line should be stretched over Jerusalem." Proclaiming, "So said the Lord of hosts, my cities shall spread out with prosperity." Now, it's interesting that Surat al-Isra in the Quran has a very similar thing. It says, "If you revert, we shall revert." But the context is completely understood differently. There it says, the concept Tabari brings on that is that twice Israel was exiled, and it's like they used up their merit. So if they try to return, then we will return. God will return to exile them. So it's completely back there. I mean, in truth, it seems to me as a historian to be rooted in a debate they had whether the return of the Jewish people to the Holy Land would be dependent on their repentance or not. And there was a discussion whether that's going to happen, whether they have to be totally righteous or don't have to be totally righteous. God will redeem them anyway. And it seems that these two quotes reflect the two views. That if the children of Israel don't repent, then there is a big problem. And in fact, one of the things that the Jews have to repent from, that even we agree, is that the Jewish people were entrusted with these revelations from God. There were many prophets sent to the entire world. Moses brought the children of Israel out of Egypt and gave them the Torah, which was given from God, with a special message. And that message was that through diversity, through your 12 tribes, through your differences, you have to find strength and serve God together as a unity. And we haven't been sharing that message. During the time of the Second Temple, Herod was great. He built the great structures he did in Jerusalem. And Josephus says Jerusalem rivaled Athens in its influence in the world. And what do they try to do? They try to get all the non-Jews to say, all right, you've got to be sort of like Jews, start bringing sacrifices, start doing all the things in the Mosaic law. And that wasn't right. That wasn't right. The Jewish people should have given them the message that the true religion is believing in God, believing in one God, believing in reward and punishment, that there's a system of justice, universal system of justice in the world, and doing good deeds. And that's the true religion. If you're doing that, Rambam says you have a chelek in you have a place, a portion in the hereafter. That's why I, as an Orthodox Jew, can look at a Muslim and say, you're keeping, you believe in one God, you believe in the last day, you're doing good deeds. As far as I'm concerned, you're on the path to the right place. I can look at you and say you're a completely perfect, complete believer. You're doing great. And in fact, I mentioned, well, I don't want to get into modern history yet, but that's basically the approach. It's multi-covenantism. Judaism, by the way the Torah is written, believes that there's multiple ways to God. God made multiple covenants with mankind, and each one was given a mission, and we have to work together to spiritual commerce to share these things together. Now, going back to what we said, there's a basic thing of what does it mean if you return, we'll return. The Jewish people look at it and say, hey, great, God's told us we can return now. And forgetting about Zionism, we just see practically it's happened. Most of the Jewish people, almost the majority of Jewish people, live in the Holy Land, live in the land which was referred to in the Torah, and that looks like the fulfillment of what's written in Zechariah. But the Quran does make a point here, that you can't just come and not make the mistakes you made before. So it's very important that we overcome this sense of battling and trying to compete with another nation. If there's Palestinians, if there's Christians, whoever it is, here we have to work together. Rabbi Schwartz, who passed away a couple of years ago, who I learned a lot from, Yoel Schwartz, who wrote about the 7 laws of Noah and that kind of thing, said that it can't be that God put us in the situation of so many Muslims and so many Palestinians and so many Jewish people in such a small area that there wasn't a reason for it. And the reason is not to fight. The reason is to get together, to respect each other, to find dignity, give each side dignity, and to live together as one ummah wahida. We need to recognize that we both follow the same, in the Islamic terms or Jewish terms, deen. We follow the same basic religion, monotheism, ethical monotheism, if you want to call that. One day, one God, last day, good deeds. We both follow the same deen. What we differ is in the covenant. Our customs are different, but we're co-religionists. We belong together. Okay, so let's talk about, as far as the, talk about the Islamic discussion of if you return, I return. Now, what's happened is the Muslim Brotherhood has taken this particular verse about if you return, I will return, to its literal meaning, and saying, if Jewish people have the gall to come back to the Holy Land after they've been kicked out twice, then it is obligated upon us to kick them out. And if they succeed in getting into Israel and Jerusalem, then it's the end of Islam. That's it. Next stop is Medina and Mecca. And it's all coming from this idea that if you return, we will return. So they believe, the Muslim Brotherhood has an ideological framework for believing that they are the select soldiers, or Hamas actually, in Gaza, and there's a whole reason why it's Gaza and not a place. Gaza and Yemen are mentioned several times in the Hadith about the end times, that they have to play a special role at kicking the Jews out, because if they don't, then everything's going to fall apart, because the Jewish people should never have returned. And they're not looking at it. If you look at the actual tafsir, the commentaries on that verse, you see there's a whole variety of opinions. That's not the only one. There's also opinions that the Jewish people will come back, that they will do repentance, they will start sharing their example, sharing these divine symbols which have been trusted to the Jewish people. The Jewish people will start sharing them. So I mean, if we do that, then we can share each other, doing things the right way. Okay, about the Temple Mount, about Jerusalem itself. People have to remember, they say that Jerusalem is the third holiest city in the holiest site in Islam, the first holiest site in Judaism. That's not really saying the story. The idea is that the Temple Mount, or the Jerusalem is where you pray. It's the direction of prayer. It's the place where you're supposed to go for Hajj, for pilgrimage, for Jewish people to go for. If you're eating a korban in Hebrew, all your celebrations are supposed to be centered there. It's exactly functions for the Jewish people exactly as the Kaaba in Mecca functions for Islam. So the current situation would be like, if you can imagine what the Kaaba would be like, if the Vatican took control of it and didn't let any Muslims visit there. It wouldn't be a happy situation. Now, it is a little bit different here, that Islam has decided that the Kaaba is restricted only to Muslims, whereas the Jewish tradition, the Qibla is supposed to be a unifying force. In other words, all the times there was a court of Gentiles, there were always encouragements for God-fearers and Jewish people to be there. Many psalms are devoted to the non-Jews who would come to Jerusalem and pray there. So for Jerusalem to be successful, it has to be an integrated place, not just Jewish people. Even the word Jerusalem itself, Shalem, the word shalom in Hebrew means for opposites to come together. You can you take things which are normally different qualities and you bring them together in a peaceful way. That's shalom. And Jerusalem is Jerusalem is the city of that peace. So it only works if it's done peacefully and if it works cooperation, if people cooperate. The whole idea of conquering Jerusalem and taking it by force is completely irrelevant and nonsensical to the religious side of Judaism. It doesn't work unless it's done through peace. The whole idea of a korban shlamim, the sacrifices these people would bring was to bring peace to people. And the idea of Messiah, they say that when will Messiah come? When all the Jewish people keep one Sabbath together, or they all do this together, all do that together. The idea is unity. Once the world becomes knowledgeable of the fact that we need each other, we have to respect each other, and each group, each ummah has something that we need, and they have something they need. We have to realize that before we're going to make peace. So, what else do we got here? I mentioned as far as the Temple Mount's huge. It's I think it's like, couldn't be shared. And the truth is, the idea of replacing any structure, building a third temple in Judaism does not mean what it means in Christianity. Christianity, you have the Book of Revelations, which talk about Jesus coming. There will be a temple in Jerusalem. So if you want Jesus to come, you have to have a temple in Jerusalem. The Jewish tradition doesn't have any of that. What we have is that we have an obligation to do Hajj, pilgrimage, sacrifices, and things. So we have an obligation to do certain commandments there. We have an obligation to live in the area, at least walking distance from that area. So, I mean, Jewish people, in order to keep the religion, have to be connected with Jerusalem, and have to be connected with the Temple Mount, have to be connected with that area. Forgetting about the political side, that's just the religious side. But there's no reason why it's exclusive. In fact, it can't be exclusive. It's exclusive, it's not working. So what we see is that this has been, it's huge, so there's room. There would be no reason, I've wrote about this in detail in other places, there's no reason why Jewish people couldn't continue to do the obligations that they've been given by the Torah in areas that are currently, nothing exists, nothing is in that area. As far as the Dome of the Rock goes, that was the Holy of Holies. One person went in there once a year. I mean, it's not a big traffic place. And the Al-Aqsa Mosque, where the Muslims daven, Muslims pray, has no meaning that was that extra part that Herod put on. It has no significance, religious significance. We see that Abd Malik, when he built the Dome of the Rock, even had this in mind. If you look at the dimensions, the length and the width, and how he built the Dome of the Rock, you can actually see that he was using the blueprint of Ezekiel 40, in building that, and it actually explains some of the in Islamic history that he said he was trying to divert pilgrims away from Mecca, Muslim pilgrims from Mecca, that they should go to Jerusalem, which is actually not the case. What was happening is he was trying to make a place for Christian pilgrims to come. And if you look at the Dome of the Rock, there was no mihrab, there was no qibla, there was no mark of which way was Mecca. There were doors on all sides, and everything that's written around the top there is written to Christians. I mean, he was making a Christian. He was basically trying to say, this is the end times. This is Ezekiel's temple. This is the third temple. It's built already. So that's what Abd Malik was doing. But as far as it talks about settlers storming the courts of the Temple Mount. I mean, first of all, they're not settlers. There's nobody coming from the West Bank to do that. I mean, maybe a couple people, but most people are coming from Jerusalem, and most of them are people who just. There are a handful of nationalists who spoil the thing for everybody, but the majority, as I said, this is the Qibla. This is like a Jew going to Mecca. This is like a Muslim going to Mecca. This is the epitome of what it means to be, Jewish. And like I said, there was a court of Gentiles, there was a court of the nations, there was a place for Israelites, a place for coining. We're all invited there, and it was supposed to be a house of prayer for all nations. Then it'll be the third temple. If it's not a house of prayer for all nations, it's not a third temple. Okay, here I talk about the Muslim Brotherhood. Yeah, one of the biggest things the Muslim Brotherhood the Hamas said during their manifesto in October 7th, one of the biggest things that bothered them is because Israel was raising some red cows. And they thought that these red cows are going to be in the temple. And first of all, nobody really remembers exactly how to do that. And these cows were donated, I don't know, whatever. They're in some place in I think the town of Shiloh. But even if it was, what we're talking about, there's, when a Muslim goes to Mecca, they have to wash themselves and wear a certain kind of garment, ihram, to purify themselves. And these red cows were burned, and their ashes made a kind of soap, a kind of cleanliness that people would wash themselves and attain a certain kind of purity that would enable them to pray properly in the Qibla. So really, you're not talking about something which is so strange, So I don't know where to go from here. What part of what we try to do at some Judaism, if you say that, for instance, the calendar, if you say that Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the year, correspond to the same day. If you go, 10 days later, you have Ashura and Yom Kippur, and you go 7 months later, you have Leila Barat and Passover, and you go after that, you have Eid al-Fitr and Pentecost. And what you see is the calendars are so that I, as a Jew, when I look at a person celebrating Eid al-Fitr, I say, great, you're doing something I can relate to. Even when you look at a minaret of a mosque, great up top. What is it? Is it a phallic symbol? Is it some kind of innuendo or something? No. What happened was there was Onias, one of the high priests, when the Antiochus came to Jerusalem and put a statue, a temple mount, to make it Heliopolis. And he was afraid that if he made a 7-candle menorah, this was Josephus talks about this, if he made a 7-candle menorah, that it would imply that there's idolatry, there's 7 gods. So he didn't do that. He made one light. In his mini version of the Jerusalem temple he made one light on top of a tall building. And then you read in, Tabari talks about it in the kingdom of Hanyar, which was 400 years a Jewish kingdom in Saudi Arabia. They would make houses of worship and communication centers along the Silk Road. And in their houses of worship, they would make a tall building like this with a light on top, and they would communicate when the new month was beginning, when a person died, this kind of thing. So when I look at a minaret, I don't see, as a Jew, as an Orthodox Jew, I don't see some foreign symbol. I see an echo of the menorah, which was in my holy place in Jerusalem. And so it's great, And as far as Muslims want to worship in Jerusalem, great. That's fine with me. They want to come to the Temple Mount, great. Let's all do it together. Let's do it, like Mohsin said at the beginning, I'd heard this also that, if you'd never imagine Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Jesus, that are fighting out like we do. I mean, we're being terrible followers of these prophets. We should behave like the prophets told us to. So where are we today? We have, after the fall of the end of the Cold War, between this, people began to recognize the importance of propaganda, that military might, people's emphasis was less on military might and more on propaganda, what you can get by, convincing people that they've got a certain idea. And, we've reached an era, a time when, when information slander is so effective that somebody could post a TikTok post that was completely fabricated, and that'll cause the beheading of an entire family in Nigeria. I mean, the tremendous power, which is put into words nowadays, shows the strength, the potential for evil, but also the potential for good. So we need to do that. I'll say that for the end.
Rabbi Benjamin, can you sum up, please?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talk about metacovenants. Let's talk about the Orthodox view of Zionism. Orthodox view of Zionism, there's many different kinds. many different views. Now, when we talk about Zionism, I'm referring here to Theodor Herzl's Zionism, you know, the kind of secular state to be like Europe, basically a homeland for the Jewish people. It should center on the Jewish people. Cultural state as a member of its, citizens. There's nothing to do with religion. You have the Neturei Karta, which are activists against the state. You have the anti-Zionists, non-Zionists, religious Zionists, alternatives, you know, all the different views here. But when you talk about numbers, and Neturei Karta, the ones you see in the news all the time, you're hugging Ahmadinejad and all that, they're less than 800 people in the entire world. I mean, it's really not a lot of people. The anti-Zionist people in Satmar and Stamford Hill, they're, like 300,000 people, but they're mostly angry at what happened during the Holocaust, where the Jewish Agency did not save their people, or at least they believe that they were not saved like they should have been saved. So it's more of a cultural thing. They don't love Palestinians. I mean, there's no special love for the other there. All there is in this group is hatred for the Jewish Agency. Then you have the non-Zionists and the religious Zionists, which are the vast majority of people who basically take a pragmatic approach, saying, Zionism has nothing to do with religion, let's just try and work things for the better. Let's try and make things better. So what you have here, the last two things I want to say is that basically Zionism is effectively irrelevant to the vast majority, like 90% or 80% of religious Judaism. And it can be argued that Zionism in the religious sense is totally irrelevant also in Israel. Herzl envisioned a secular liberal state. Ben-Gurion envisioned the idea of the new Jew. And since the 1980s, you just don't hear about it. You talk about post-Zionism. You talk about, 30% of the Knesset is religious parties, which have totally not compatible views with that. Sabbath observance, subsidies for yeshivas, religious schools are supported. People are becoming more religious, and it's a complete collapse of the secular Zionist ideology, and it's being replaced by something else. It's a shift to pragmatism, where most Haredim, even formerly anti-Zionist groups, are taking a pragmatic stance, where they want to basically be the best Jews they can and follow the Sharia of Torah, follow the covenant of Torah, and live like we're supposed to, and that is to show them the idea of diversity, unity and diversity working in the real world. And then the last thing here is, not only is Zionism irrelevant, here I go over this, but since the 1990s, the number of Sephardi Jews, the Jews who have come from Islamic countries, are now starting to greatly outnumber the number of Ashkenazi Jews, the ones who came from Christian countries. I don't believe in the Khazar theory and all that. That doesn't make sense. But anyway, what's happening is there's a complete change going on since the 1990s of an Orientalized Israeli identity, where there's a stronger shift towards religious traditionalism. There's greater respect for Arab and Muslim cultures. There's more of a familiar community-based political culture. And it's shifting from Western-style secularism towards Middle Eastern cultural blendings. It's changing foreign policy. A lot of people don't realize what's going on here. And I guess one obvious explanation is the Abraham Accords, which is an attempt to try and be a good neighbor. And like I say, we live in a time of the Dajjal. That we believe that right now that we're living in a time where there's a great amount of deceit going on and a great amount of effort, people trying to stop this working together. And I haven't found a better summation of this period than what I found in this hadith. It says Abu Musa Shayat said, he says, the Prophet said there will be harj. He says, what is harj? It's similar to the Hebrew word harag. It's deceit and killings. And so we said, even more than now? And he said, the Prophet said, peace be upon him, it will not be the unbelievers killing you. Rather, you'll be killing each other. the intellects of the general masses at that time will be deceived. They will be following fools that have no intellects themselves. They will be assuming they have a legitimate cause, but they will not have a legitimate cause. There is no, what do you call it? Well, I'll just leave it at that. You know, there's a lot of attempts to go away from peace, and the media benefits from going away from peace. And I think we need to do all we can to work together to make peace. So that's it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rabbi Benjamin Abrams. And now there's your last 15 minutes. Huge amount of questions, yeah. But thank you for what's the word, laying the canvas. Now, I'll be open with you. There's been an issue with Palestinian and Arab speakers. I don't want to go into it just now, right? Indeed, right now, I might be mistaken, even the Palestinian brother expert. Khaled, are you there? Yeah, he's gone. Right, look, but what we've got...
Wayne, I'm here.
Yeah, we've got... Is that Khaled?
Yes.
Oh, great, right. Because...
Sorry, Caleb, have I met you?
I don't know.
I was in Hebron about just before Corona with Sheikh Tamimi.
No. We were expelled from Hebron. My father was expelled in 1992.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So I've not been living in Hebron since.
Yeah. Okay, I'll come into that. Let me. We got to. What I was trying to say is we got to expect the unexpected. We've got a prominent figure who's joined us, Dr. Muzammal Ayub Thakur from the Justice Foundation. He is based in the UK, well, and abroad. He's in Geneva right now over the India-Pakistan, let's call it, crisis. Now, he was meant to speak after Dr. Khaled, but even Dr. Khaled came out the blue to join us today. So, Khaled, what I was trying to say is your perspective is vital, yeah? But can you wait for
yes, no problem.
Dr. Muzammal, because he's got a United Nations meeting in Geneva that he has to rush. Is that okay with you?
No problem. It's a pleasure listening to him.
Yeah, okay. Now, so in a sense, we're jumping the gun. But anyway, indeed, I think we had another Pakistani speaker who's also a commissioner in Lahore near the Indian border. He's on a television personality. I don't even know where he is. I think it's something to do with the crisis with India and the mobilization of armed forces. It is serious because I've been looking at it. So anyway, coming to Dr. Muzammal Ayub Thakur. Can you hear me, Muzammal?
I can, yes, thank you.
Right. If you don't mind, can you introduce yourself and your expertise about India and your work? And the title that we've given to you is a Zionist Hindutva Nexus. Yeah? You've explained on human rights, etc. So over to you, please. Firstly, thank you for coming. And this has been recorded. We hope to get it onto YouTube, inshallah.
Sure.
So over to you.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Dr. Khaled, I apologize for taking your spot. I recently heard you on the Thinking Muslim podcast, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was on there myself a few months ago. It's ironic that after speaking on the Thinking Muslim podcast, whatever happened over the last few days, it's become, I don't want to say that I predicted it, but at least, you know, we were able to extrapolate what could have happened and exactly what has happened. And trying to keep this as short as possible, just in case I have to fly off. I'm going to try and explain the link between Hindutva, radical Hindutva, and Zionism, at least the version of Zionism that most people understand today.
So, sorry for interrupting. Can you also mention a bit about your background, which organization and the Kashmiri movement? Yeah.
Sure. I'm at the moment the executive director of the Justice Foundation. We merged with the Kashmir Institute of International Affairs. We mostly work on lobbying publications and diplomatic work in the United Nations as well as in the United Kingdom. We've done a lot of work in the UN Human Rights Council, and we often are seen in universities lecturing on the issue of Kashmir, but more specifically on the Hindutva nature of Kashmir. I guess for the first part of my professional life in this field, it was mostly about the human rights, but over the years we've understood that it's not necessarily always about the victims, but sometimes you really need to focus on the perpetrators of those crimes as well, so that you can understand why it's happening as just opposed to fixing cancer with a band-aid. So that's the kind of work that we've been doing, at least I've been doing, for at least about 20 years. I was born in exile. My father was thrown out of Kashmir before I was born. I wasn't able to travel to Kashmir for the longest time. And my father, after he passed away in 2004, was unable to return back to Kashmir. Despite not considering himself to be an Indian. So my entire family have suffered over the last so many years. First because of my father, now because of myself. A lot of the work that I do has unfortunate consequences for my family inside Kashmir. All cousins that are languishing in jail just because they are related to me. Other members have been killed. My uncle was assassinated a few years ago because I made a comment about convicting human rights violators as war criminals in the United Nations, and my uncle was assassinated because of that. So we have an unfortunate history of transnational repression as well. It's not just my family inside Kashmir. Last year, I was attacked on the streets after delivering a lecture in London. I suffered a broken rib. I recovered very, very quickly. I can't say what happened to the other people. I don't want to incriminate myself, but yeah, there are consequences not just to the people that live inside the conflict zones, but as we've all seen what's happened in America, particularly with the Turkish student that was arrested, and I think another Palestinian student that was also arrested for talking about Palestine. We also face similar problems out here in the West as well. I'll move on to the part about Hindutva and Zionism. I'll focus on the I'll focus on the Indian-Israeli nexus and how the Hindutva Zionist projects are two sides of the same coin, and maybe about the formation of Hindutva ideology and then its consequence and future ambitions. I want to begin with explaining why it took 3 years for India to recognize Israel and delay formal diplomatic relations. This is going back to the 40s. One of the reasons people give is that the first Indian Prime Minister Nehru and other Indian anti-colonial leaders were fundamentally opposed to the idea of a state created based on Zionism, because India was scarred by their own experience of partition and the creation of a Muslim-majority Pakistan, which was the first country to be founded based on religious nationalism. And in fact, they were highly sympathetic. India were highly sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, or rather that was the need of the hour for India at that time. Because why would they have had the need to irritate Arab Muslims, especially when India was a budding nation in need of oil and in need of friendly countries where they could send workers to learn and send remittance back to India. Israel had the US and Europe, while India focused on the Gulf countries. And while India was building a nation and in support of the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, which is also interesting, they were also strengthening their occupation in Kashmir despite publicly making statements in favor of Palestinian rights. And to appease Muslim countries, India's first prime minister was actively in favor of Kashmiri people's right to self-determination. Now, some very important quotes by the first prime minister of India: "We have decided that the fate of Kashmir is ultimately to be decided by the people. The pledge we have given not only to the people of Kashmir, but to the world. We will not and cannot back out of it." And this is verbatim. "If they tell us to walk out, I would have no hesitation in quitting Kashmir. We will not keep them against our will, however painful it may be to us. We want no forced marriages, no forced unions." That is all verbatim. Now, maybe that's rhetoric, empty words, maybe even lip service. You can call it what you want, but not a single promise was fulfilled. And instead, India tightened its grip on Kashmir, making it the highest militarized zone in the world and densest military to civilian ratio in the world. Some people argue that it's 1 military person to every 10 civilians. Others argue it's to every 8 civilians. The formerly colonized Indians had become colonizers of Kashmir and had the audacity to disapprove of Israel's occupation and colonization of Palestine. the same prime minister who openly condemned Israel and supported Palestine, sought help from Israel during India's first war against China, and then again with Pakistan. Israel obliged and extended India military support on Nehru's request that the weapons be shipped without Israeli flags. So despite India supporting the Palestinian cause openly, Israel helped India, my mistake. Now, that could be considered odd, but not when you know how international relations, politics, diplomacy, and more importantly, back channels work in the real world. The veil of secrecy was lifted, but still nobody noticed, or maybe nobody cared. This episode of Indian-Israeli military cooperation begins to expose the real relationship between India and Israel, one of back channels and back scratching. They both knew they would need each other in the future to fulfill their ambitions, but for the sake of success, they maintained a covert relationship. Formal ties were established between India and Israel in 1992, and interestingly, the destruction of the Babri Masjid, the very important event that happened in India, happened on the 6th of December 1992. Could it be a coincidence? I don't believe that. The plan was executed by the RSS members, the political wing of the BJP, who had become the second largest party in the country. From 2 seats in 1984 to about 120 seats in 1992, when the Babri Masjid was demolished. Just to explain, the Babri Masjid was built in 1527 by the Mughal emperor and destroyed nearly 500 years later with the excuse that it was previously home to a sacred temple where their Lord Ram was born. Does that sound familiar, that narrative? So once formal ties were established in 92 and Babri Masjid was destroyed, defense and trade relations took off between Israel and India. And Israel quickly became India's second defense partner, largest second partner. However, the two nations didn't enjoy a close relationship publicly, even then. Ariel Sharon was the first Israeli prime minister to visit India in 2003. So it took decades for them to actually physically meet each other in their respective countries. And even though they were defense and trade partners, India regularly used to vote against Israel in the UN General Assembly to continue appeasing the Muslim bloc for the purpose of oil, trade, and labor force. So till 2003, India were voting against Israel despite having huge weapons deals with each other, and Israel helped India against the war in China. In 2017, coming more recent to recent events, was the first time that an Indian prime minister visited Israel. And then in 2018, Modi, Narendra Modi, the now prime minister of India, was the first Indian prime minister to ever visit Palestine and was awarded the highest civilian award by the Palestinian Authority. Now, this isn't a critique of Palestine, but an insight into India's duplicity. A year later, in 2019, Modi hit the final nail on Kashmir's coffin by annexing the disputed territory of Kashmir and turning it into a union territory of India, no different to maybe Delhi or Mumbai. So India publicly supported Palestine, voted against Israel in the UN, but took help from Israel during their wars, became Israel's second largest weapons importer, and then converted a UN-designated disputed territory into another state of India. Now, 20 years after Sharon's visit, 5 years after Modi's Palestine visit, and 4 years after burying Kashmir in the annals of history, Modi's unambiguous support for Israel after 7th of October broke India's long-standing public position, where they used to present a decorum of neutrality. Where India needed to buy time to take sides, they're now free to show their real colors with no need to hide their fascist agenda under the cover of being a secular and democratic country. India was quick to take a strong position in favor of Israel this time, as it best served both countries' interests and, more importantly, solidify their anti-terror narrative. The Hindu-Zionist nexus is so deep that while the world was still trying to make sense of what happened on 7th of October, India embarked on an online campaign of their own to show a robust support for Israel with hashtags like India stands with Israel and India in solidarity with Israel. A recent report highlighted that most of the world's tweets in support of Israel were bot-manufactured tweets from India. Apart from buying tweets, India buys more weapons from Israel than any other country in the world. India purchases around $1 billion worth of arms from Israel annually, nearly half of their production, which includes drones, machine guns, cyber warfare, and more. Israel has started to co-produce weapons in several factories in India. And when you're buying weapons, it means you're planning on using them. And India has not only used Israeli fighter jets, bomb cybersecurity surveillance systems in its occupation of Kashmir, but has trained its armed forces in Israel and borrowed Israeli tactics, and India reciprocates the favor by training Israeli forces and sharing their own strategies. So there are obviously many questions that need to be answered. And At what point did India evolve into a right-wing fascist neo-settler colonial enterprise determined to form a pan-Hindu nation? Or was it always in the underbelly of society, hidden away, waiting to rear its ugly head at the right time? Where did the inspiration come from? What is the end game? And what exactly is the relationship between many independent struggles come to the fore, including in India. Now, early proponents of Hindutva called for a return to in which Hinduism was the basis of society. And as a result, Hindu nationalists argued that the Hindus were the original inhabitants and that everyone else were foreigners or invaders who contaminated the nation. I use the word contaminated on purpose because that's the language that they use. This sounds very much like Zionism, but just to clarify, this is still Hindutva that I'm talking about. Now, as the struggle for independence from British started, the Hindu nationalist movement looked at the Muslims as their main internal enemy that needed to be cleansed. The RSS was established on this very basis in 1925 and became the central hub of Hindu nationalist supremacist ideology with the aim of creating a Hindu state. The RSS has given birth to nearly 60,000 offshoots, as well as its own youth wing, religious wing, charitable organization, education syllabus, and of course its political wing, the BJP, which Modi is now running. And all that wasn't until, and isn't limited to India, but exported internationally, these organizations. Whatever happened in Leicester, for example, a few years ago, if anybody remembers, the riots that happened between Muslims and Hindus, is a direct Indian export. The RSS was inspired and influenced by fascist regimes in Europe, such as Mussolini's Italy, and more importantly, Nazi Germany. They even sent their members in 1930s and 40s to learn the basis of fascism from the best. Even today, the RSS uniform is brown shorts and long socks, borrowed from 1930s Europe. Even the salute is identical. Now, taking inspiration from Adolf Hitler and Mussolini, the RSS asserted that India belonged to Hindus and the country's minorities, listen carefully, the country's minorities should be treated along the lines of the Nazis' treatment of Jews. This is from their literature. I'm not making this up. There are still places in India who openly worship Hitler, using the swastika to sell Nazi merchandise. But today's generation of Hindutva nationalists are inspired by Israeli Zionism and look towards them as their mentors. It's a strange jump from supporting Nazis to aligning with Zionists, right? Not so. The common theme of these ideologies is what's important. They're all the same. Building a pure-blooded nation because they believe they are a superior race and eliminate those they consider to be less immortals. Otherwise, the support Hindutva gives to Nazis and Zionism makes no sense. Zionists and Hindutva learnt to modernize and adapt their version of fascism to slowly and steadily progress and take their time, unlike the rush of maybe Hitler, which explains the more than a century-long project of Hindutva and Zionists predating Nazism. One would think that Israel would have been wary of India for their support of Palestine and disapproval of Israel all at the same time. But on the contrary, they were always unified in establishing their supremacist ideology and in their attempt to destroy Islam and Muslims and take lessons of occupation and expansionism from each other, including influencing power corridors and public opinion, which is very apparent today. If we look closer today to today, 5 years ago in 2019, Modi's government revoked Kashmir's semi-autonomous status, which essentially maintained that Kashmir is a UN disputed territory, and on paper protected our land rights. And I say on paper, as Indian occupation forces for decades have already taken over our schools, hospitals, residential homes, and even land. A senior Indian diplomat, Sandeep Chakraborty, in New York, I guess 2019, said something that was an open secret, that India would look to replicate the Israeli model in Indian occupied Kashmir, literally saying, again, verbatim, if Israel can do it, so can we. Now, beyond the physical occupation of Kashmir, of Kashmiri people, India has started turning our masjids into mandirs, Hindu temples, forcing our children to sing Hindu hymns, which they call bhajans in schools, instead of the Islamic call to prayer, redesigning an acceptable form of Islam and banning our cultural clothing that protects our modesty and forcefully introducing drugs, alcohol, and prostitution into our society, which was unheard of, replacing our Kashmiri and Urdu heritage and language into Hindi and Sanskrit traditions. Now, we have been in the process of genocide and ethnic cleansing since 1947, which continues today, but also economic, cultural, and religious genocide as well. In recent years, Israel and India have cultivated a very public strategic alliance, unlike the covert ones in the past, born from the political ambitions of both Modi and Netanyahu against the backdrop of flourishing far-right nationalism and authoritarianism. And with this new alliance and friendship based on Islamophobia, and the fact that both Zionism and Hindutva are pushing colonial and expansionist ideas, a new map has emerged that Netanyahu's Likud party aspires for, including the whole of Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, big parts of Syria, Iraq, Egypt, and parts of Saudi Arabia. They object to the slogan, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," but find it reasonable to occupy all their neighboring countries by force. And on the other hand, India's expansionist vision, called Akhand Bharat, goes as far as the Middle East, to the extent that they call the Holy Kaaba in Mecca one of the most sacred places for Muslims, referring to it as Makeshwar Mahadev Temple. They just simply cannot tolerate any Islamic Muslim era building names in India, to the extent that they call the Taj Mahal, which everybody knows that it's called Taj Mahal, but now they want to rebrand it as the Tejo Mahalaya Temple, the Qutub Minar as the Vishnu Stamp Temple, and of course the controversial now demolished Babri Masjid as the Ram Mandir. And they've even started to change the names of cities in India that have Muslim roots, but that isn't new for Kashmir, and we've been experiencing that for decades. But let's make it clear, the BJP is open and transparent about its agenda. It doesn't mean the opposition party is any different. The Indian Congress Party has its own expansionist plan, where they used to dream of having breakfast in Kabul, in Afghanistan, lunch in Lahore in Pakistan, and dinner in Delhi. The only difference between the BJP and the Congress is one is blunt and the other one uses a velvet glove. Kashmir has always been India's laboratory experiment, where they've experimented with various versions of oppression and subjugation while continuing their illegal occupation. It's never mattered which political party was in power. The Indian state has always maintained a singular policy on Kashmir, but there's more to India's policy. Using Kashmir as a testing ground for more than 70 years, the Indian government finally exported its trials to mainland India, building the Ram Mandir on the ashes of the Babri Masjid, and also in the shape of the CAA and NRC bills. That's called the Citizens Amendmentship Act and the National Register of Citizens, that essentially make Muslims and other minorities second-class citizens, with detention camps, for example, in the state of Assam. And to further demonize Islam and Muslims, Zionism and Hindutva peddle extensively in pinkwashing, which when India abrogated Kashmir's semi-autonomous status in 2019, it embarked on a project to justify the move by claiming it would improve the rights of the LGBTQ community in Kashmir. And this is something that Israel has repeatedly pursued in Palestine to deflect from its own human rights abuses, while presenting its colonialism and as a modernizing or civilizing project. Now, Hindutva and Zionism also routinely use feminism to this end, or a way to demonize Arab Muslims and Muslim men of India and Kashmir. This, of course, is a colonial tool, which we already saw in the US-led invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq. The promise of delivering women's rights and democracy was an essential feature of that invasion, if anybody remembers. Hindutva heavily borrows from all of this. Now, India protests the hypocrisy. India protests if Taliban stops girls from going to school, but they put a hijab ban on schools in India. In a lot of the states, I can't say all of India, but a lot of the states in India, they put a hijab ban, a scarf ban on girls. Senior BJP members tell their followers to celebrate the abrogation of Article 370 so that they can forcefully marry white-skinned Kashmiri women as if our women are some sort of commodities. Now, Zionism and Hindutva also focus on education and culture like traditional fascist movements do, but spend a lot of time trying to erase and dilute occupied people's history and identity and culture by adjusting textbooks or appropriating cuisine, in Kashmir's case, for example, Indianizing it. Our traditional Wazwan cuisine is based on meat dishes and is now being forcefully turned into vegetarian food. Now, you may not see the relevance in this, but it's the cultural genocide that we're talking about. And I'm sure you know about how the lynchings happen for even transporting meat in India with no consequence, which is strange considering that India happens to be the largest exporter of beef, and those exporters are all Hindu, by the way. We have seen that if anyone questions, scrutinizes, or critiques Zionism, you will be slapped with the accusation of anti-Semitism, despite knowing full well there is a difference between Judaism and Zionism. Now, Hindus have not faced the same traumas that Jews have gone through over the centuries, but are trying to manufacture that trauma using Jewish experience. Today, the Hindu nationalist lobby in the US, for example, exaggerates the criticism it is facing and reframes it as an attack on Hinduism, and as such, they call it Hinduphobia. Another issue shielding Hindutva from wider criticism is actually the cultural capital that India has established through yoga, Bollywood, and the symbol of Gandhi. It's hard for people to come to terms with the fact that Hindutva comes from the same place even though the person who killed Gandhi was associated with the RSS and still celebrated in India. But still the RSS and BJP tried to reclaim Gandhi because of the cultural power he wields in the West. At least with the BJP and RSS, Muslims know where they stand. The liberals, on the other hand, use a more Gandhian approach, but both are as bad as each other. Two major responses emerged when Indians addressed the issue of Kashmiri's aspirations for liberation. The first are the Indian liberals. They pathologize the desire. They turn this desire of freedom into some sort of illness, a disease, an abnormality, an abomination, as something must have triggered this desire for freedom. Otherwise, why would anyone want freedom? They claim Kashmiri youth desire liberation because of unemployment or because of the Indian army's behavior, further arguing that if Kashmiris are treated well, the disease of desiring freedom will go away and Kashmiris will be healthy again. Now, the second reaction is of Hindu nationalists. According to them, what a Kashmiri needs is not therapeutic confinement, but punitive punishment. They don't view us as patients, as Indian liberals do, but as criminals and a disease who they have to brutally discipline and punish and eliminate. Both views are dehumanizing. The liberals want to assimilate us and the nationalists want to eliminate us. And I argue that assimilation itself is elimination, but a slower process, which we've seen pre-Modi. Now ask the Palestinians what they prefer, to die standing with the Shahada on their lips, or a lifetime on their knees banned from being a Muslim. It's no different for the Muslims of Kashmir. The only difference is that where Israel have failed, and people may challenge me on this, I feel that Israel have failed and India have succeeded in suppressing information, news, activism on Kashmir. It doesn't take a minute to debunk Zionist lies, as we've seen, especially since October 7th. And Israel have lost the information and propaganda war, thanks mostly to social media. And there's a huge international pressure and attention for example, the Rohingya, and rightfully so, the Uyghurs even. The case of the Rohingya has been lodged in the ICJ, but Kashmir lags behind, maybe for our own failures, maybe the Muslim nations' failures, but certainly because of India's long-term vision and strategy, learning from the mistakes and setbacks of their Zionist brothers. In Kashmir, international humanitarian aid organizations are banned from coming or even sending financial packages to local partners, and that policy is now rolled out to the rest of India. So as I was mentioning before that we were a laboratory experiment, all of these trials get exported to mainland India. The UN military observers, for example, are essentially under house arrest inside Kashmir. UN military observers, with their compounds surrounded by Indian forces, despite having a mandate by the UN, agreed upon by the Indian government, probably the best definition of being toothless tigers. Amnesty International were thrown out of India in 2020, a year after India illegally absorbed Kashmir. And funnily enough, the reason was for an event that they held on the subject of Kashmir. Civil society members are routinely arrested, tortured, killed, and not just unknown people. Khurram Parvez is an internationally recognized and celebrated activist whose work is cited by the United Nations, for example, the Human Rights Commissioner, and he continues to languish in jail. Even journalism is choked, with Kashmiri journalists jailed for years upon years, some murdered and others enforcibly disappeared. The BBC was vilified in 2019 for reporting on India's illegal actions on Kashmir, with their offices raided, their staff harassed and threatened with being banned. The Twitter office in India faced nearly the same thing, and now with new policies in place where the government can monitor, track and trace users of free speech. Now, for what purpose? Well, we know that the assassinations Zionists have attempted and succeeded in, but little is known or covered of India's transnational death squads. A few weeks ago, the US foiled a plot to kill a Sikh separatist in New York. And before that, I hope you're aware, Canadian intelligence confirmed India's hand in the assassination of a Sikh man on Canadian soil. Indian spies have been caught both in Germany and Qatar, but still no vilification of India's global Hindutva agenda. Now, we often hear about the Zionist lobby and power corridors around the world and how many businesses are directly funding Israel. That's no secret. But Hindutva lobby is no less powerful, only more secretive and covert. And although they may not have the same clout as the Zionists, they certainly have their foots in many doors. Microsoft, Google, YouTube, World Bank, Adobe, IBM, Starbucks, all have Indian CEOs. And all these organizations are considered to be pro-Zionism. Do you think that's a coincidence? Because I don't. Even the British Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, Rishi Sunak, former British Prime Minister, had links to the BJP and called himself India's son-in-law. And I won't even go into Priti Patel's links, the former Home Minister. Now, although Israel is losing the propaganda warfare, India has found success. Their disinformation campaign has been so extensive and far-reaching, Kashmiris have lost their jobs, threatened with extradition, successfully attempted assassinations on foreign soil, banned from returning to Kashmir as a result. Family members and friends no longer maintaining relationships with people like myself, not because they perceive Kashmiris as criminals, but fear of being guilty by association. And I tell you this with authority because my wife and I are direct victims of these actions. Our families are direct victims. And now my 3-year-old son is also a victim. And hopefully his early memories will be of his mother and father fighting the good fight, resisting extermination, and being on the true path. And it's not just me. Every Kashmiri has a similar or worse memory from childhood. For example, when Kashmiris talk about sexual violence against women, Indians argue rapes are happening all over India and therefore cannot be considered worse crime in Kashmir. But when a physiotherapy student was gang raped in India in a moving bus on the streets of Delhi in December 2012, the outrage was such that the entire of India erupted into militant protests and demanded justice for the victims and punishment for the accused. Rightfully so. However, 6 years later in 2018, 8-year-old Asifa Banu from Kashmir was abducted, raped for 8 days in a Hindu temple near her house, tortured and killed by smashing a massive stone on top of her head. And apart from a few sympathy tweets, no solidarity protests or anything. But here's the twist. There were protests in favor of the accused as they were members of the BJP. State-sponsored rape is a well-orchestrated and manufactured part of the overall plan to break the spirit and, if possible, the soul of Kashmiri people and their will to resist. And bear in mind, we're talking about a disputed territory, a conflict zone. These few cases were reported by various international agencies, including Human Rights Watch and Physicians for Human Rights. But the majority of cases go unreported, as there's no obvious threat by the Indian Army and the government. There is an obvious threat by the Indian Army and government if anyone pursues a case. Not a single member of Indian Armed Forces has ever been convicted to date in any case of human rights violations. But there is, in fact, a list of names of who have been awarded for their crimes in the occupied territory. Take, for example, an army major who was given an award for using a Kashmiri civilian as a human shield. Now, the impact of Indian occupation and illegal draconian laws is not limited to physical abuse. Nearly half of the adult population suffers from psychological distress. A quarter suffer from PTSD, a third suffer from anxiety, and half suffer from depression. Mental illness is still a taboo in our part of the world. Many cases go unreported, let alone the case of sexual violence to women, children, and even men. In closing, allow me to remind you what the Zionism Hindutva agenda is. It's a settler colonization, demographic change, expansionism agenda, and the destruction of Islam and Muslims. Now, I don't know how much more I can go into this in terms of the technical details of what we actually have to face on a daily basis, but in the greater grander scheme of things, particularly what's happened over the last few days between India and Pakistan, the Kashmiri voices and the Kashmiri narrative gets lost. Our narrative is always going to be the same thing, which is the Hindutva lobby wants to eliminate Kashmiris. They want to create a pan-Hindu nation. They want to go as far as Nepal. They want to absorb Bangladesh. They want to take over Iran. They want to. They believe Afghanistan belongs to them. And again, the Saudi Arabia also belongs to them. If you look at that map, as I mentioned before, they want to split it between the two. Now, recently I was reading, rather my wife was reading something, and she reminded me that there will be a time where Muslims will be too fearful to say that they are Muslims anymore. And that's happening inside Kashmir. There is a direct war on Muslims and Islam. And in the context of how Muslims see Zionism and the end of days and the Mahdi coming and Jesus, peace be upon him, coming back, there's also a hadith that talks about a war being held in Hind, in India. And once it's going to be liberated by the occupiers or by the fascist regime, they will return to Syria, and on their way they will meet the Mahdi. So if we're going to talk about the end of days, and as Muslims or as Jews or as Christians, we're focusing on the area of Palestine, I don't disagree with that. My only concern is we're escaping our responsibility of seeing what's happening in the East, and how these two fascist regimes are ushering in the end of days. And I'm going to close with this because I have to run off now. I just want to ask you this. Are we truly, as Jews, as Christians, and as Muslims, or any other religions, are we truly ready for the end of days? Are we actually prepared to face our Lord in the way that we are? Have we done enough to wash away our sins and earn enough good deeds to face our God? We all believe in the same God, the one true God, regardless of what our religions are. If we ignore what is happening in the East, what the Indians are doing, we will, in my opinion, we will be ushering in the end of days much, much quicker. And I'm not prepared for that. As a Muslim, I don't think that I'm ready. I think my faith is still weak. I still need to work on myself, and I hope that we all believe that we are not perfect individuals, and we will continue to better ourselves before the final days of life. Thank you very much. I have to run away now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thakur. I understand and respect you have to go. Inshallah, we hope to collaborate again. Thank you. Okay. Is everyone, can you all hear me? Hussein? Hello, Hussein, you there?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, Clive, yeah. Hussein, are you there? The IT guy? Baba Yunus? I don't know what's happened to our people in Ghana. Oh, okay, listen, that was brilliant about the connection, about real-time fascism, really, and indeed the UK connection. You heard them referring to not just trade, but our former British Indian Prime Minister. I'm not surprised, but let's come back to the agenda. Khaled, you there? I saw you.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, basically, as you can see, I mean, a lot of this, what you call the content that I've put together is based on our forum. You know, we got over 10,000, maybe 20,000 videos now, including in English, Arabic, and Urdu. Now, the point I'm making is that we had another speaker from Pakistan. Just to correct that, Dr. Thakur mentioned Kashmir. He's actually Kashmiri. Now, the other chap, I've not even got a clue where he is, but he was going to go into the eschatological dimension. Dr. Abdul Salam Arif, he's actually a commissioner, which means quite a high up in Lahore, border city to India. And he was going to speak about Baitul Muqaddas, which is Jerusalem, Malhama, the Great War, and Ghazwa Hind, let's call it Indian-Pakistan War. I don't know who else it could be, Ghazwa Hind. The correlation in present and future world scenarios. I don't even know where he is. I think, given his position and military, Pakistan military movements and Indian military, he's probably caught up, and he can't even maybe talk. Okay. So what we want to do now is, and I'm delighted really, to introduce, again, I know what the problem will be. You must have been very busy, but I did my homework. So we have got now Dr. Khalid Al-Owaisi, who is a Palestinian. I'm delighted we have a Palestinian and Arab, if you want to call it, Muslim perspective. I was even up for an Arab-Christian perspective from Bethlehem, but to contact, maybe you can help us, yeah? Widen the contacts with the Arab Christians in the Jerusalem West Bank. But basically, what we agreed upon was uninterrupted, again, presentation on Al-Mahdi. What did we decide upon, the title? Sorry, I've got to, let me introduce it. What we agreed upon was a global Islamic strategy for the liberation of Al-Aqsa and Bayt al-Maqdis. I just want to just clarify the title. Of course, Muslims can live with Jews. The question mark is the Israeli state, right? Just to be clear about the underpinnings to the title. And I'm sure Dr. Khalid Al-Owaisi is coming from that perspective, especially since we've got a Jewish rabbi who's also here. And after that, we will open up to discussion. I'm sure there's a lot of questions. So at the beginning, you got 30 minutes, maybe more if you wish, because one of the other Arab, well, two Muslim speakers, I don't know what's happened, although Dr. Karim has written a book on Jerusalem and the future Islamic governance of Palestine. He might pop up. He's another strange one from America. But right now you have the liberty, yeah? and to give a relax, because you're a tremendous scholar and activist, dare I say, to go into this beyond 30 minutes, and then we will open it up if not the other speakers don't pop up. So maybe you can introduce yourself. I haven't done full justice. So an introduction and then fire away. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Peace be upon you all. Assalamu alaikum. Just following on the story of Muzammil, our story is rather similar. My grandfather was expelled from his home close to Ramla, and I grew up in Hebron, in Al Khalid, where we have our house and our land. In 1948, one of my uncles, while my grandfather was expelled from his home, he was killed. And in 1967, my second uncle was murdered by the Zionist militias. And growing up in Hebron during the first Intifada, going to school was very difficult. Just what you see today in Gaza, we were attacked. Our primary school was attacked by Israeli soldiers throwing grenades and tear gas at kids at the school. So this is something that started way before even the establishment of Hamas or even the Muslim Brotherhood. The injustice in Palestine has been going on for a long time. Not forgetting that before this Zionist state, Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived side by side in Palestine for not a year or two, for centuries. And I'd like to cover this because this is important background to see how people did get on. And this is the land that is meant to have peace. However, it is today a land, but this we are certain from an Islamic point of view, I shall say, this is a land where tyrants are destroyed. And we have seen this throughout history, going back to the story of Dawood and Jalut, David and Goliath, where David, Dawood in Islam, both a prophet and a king, and a Khalifa. The only prophet mentioned with the title Khalifa is Dawood, and he is not seen as a Jewish king, but a king for all people. Even when the Quran mentions him, he says, Ya Dawood, inna ja'alnaka khalifata, we have made you a khalifa, a vice regent for all people, so rule justly. One thing that I have seen throughout the speakers, that justice is connected with this land. Without justice, this land cannot survive. And whenever injustice, and this is connected to the meaning of this land, I'll share my screen, and I will come to this. In Islam, this land is known as Al-Ardu al-Muqaddasa, the Holy Land. But holiness in Arabic has an amazing meaning that I will go into. But before I start, we cannot be talking about Palestine and end of times today without really feeling ashamed of our humanity, that we have not been able to stop this genocide that has continued in this land, and it has reached limits beyond anything. You have seen the genocide and the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Today, something similar happened in 1948. But this is going to a completely new level. And I really feel not ashamed of Muslims and the Ummah alone, but I feel ashamed of all of our humanity that we see this. We said never again, yet we let it continue, sadly, today in front of our eyes. With this said, talking about the Holy Land and the importance of this land and the names of it, and it having such importance for nearly half the world's population. And also to Muslims, Christians, and Jews, this is where a lot of prophecies for what is to come before the end of times. Yet, one more thing to say, and this is echoed by the rabbi when he mentioned the meanings of Islam. This is how Islam sees itself, how the Quran explains this, that all the prophets of God were actually Muslims submitting to God. And Islam is not a religion that Muhammad invented. Even the Quran mentions this, that he is not an invention amongst the prophets, yet it is the same religion of Noah, the same religion of Jesus and Moses and Abraham. And the Quran in the 7th century, when Jews claimed that Abraham was a Jew, or some said even was a Christian, the Quran said both the Torah and the Gospel were revealed after him. But he was a Hanif Muslim, which means he was a monotheist submitting his will to God. So Islam, post Muhammad, peace be upon him, see Islam as the final testament from God, as the Quran is the final testament from God, and Islam as the final message. Yet Islam held a very important position to both Christians and Jews, giving them the title the people of the book. And they, coming from the same light, Islam as the main foundation in Islam, that there is no compulsion in religion, this continued to allow, not just to allow the existence and coexistence with people of other religion. Islam took it upon itself to protect the churches and the synagogues, as is mentioned in the concept of tadafa, which is counterbalance, and tadawul, which is change. And these are very important two Quranic ideas that I will come back to. This land in the Quran is known by two names. One is the land of Barakah, and it's the wider region of Bilad al-Sham, Syria and Egypt, historical Syria in this sense. And the second name for this land is Al-Ardu al-Muqaddasa, which means the Holy Land in English, but Muqaddas in Arabic means purifying. So the explanation by the scholars on this land is purified from injustice. What that means is injustice would come to this land, yet this land would be purified from all forms of injustices. And we have seen numerous examples of this throughout history. The name Prophet Muhammad used for this region, the mosque and the city, is the name Baytul Maqdis, the region of Baytul Maqdis, or the Holy Land. When talking about Al-Aqsa, these are all introductory remarks because they're important to see this within the Muslim lens, within the Muslim perspective. Al-Aqsa is neither one of these buildings. Al-Aqsa is not the Dome of the Rock or the Congregational Mosque in front of that area. Al-Aqsa in Muslim tradition is the whole of this area, the whole of this compound, known as Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, known as Al-Aqsa Mosque. Within it, there is close to 200 monuments, the biggest being the basement, followed by Al-Jami' Al-Aqsa, or the Qibli, the southern mosque, and the Dome of the Rock. But the whole area is known as Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, and in the Ottoman period, it was known as Al-Haram Al-Sharif, 142,000 square meters. The topography of this area and the foundation of Al-Aqsa Mosque, according to Israeli archaeologists and other archaeologists, we can date back the foundations of this mosque to the Roman period. There's differences of opinion whether all the evidence show that this goes back to the time of Hadrian in the 2nd century after Jesus. However, some try to take it back to Herod the Great. Never mind whichever Roman period that we associate it with, whether it is in the 1st century or in the 2nd century. The Muslims, when they built Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, and on top of these ancient foundations, and I will come back to explain this, why this is important to Muslims, because Muslims see this was always a mosque from the beginning of humanity, a place of worship, and this is mentioned clearly in the tradition of the Prophet and in association with the Kaaba, which the Quran associates it as the first place of worship for humans. You see these ancient foundations today at Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and you see these foundations, and you see the Muslims building on top of these ancient foundations, and there is a lot of discussion that goes on around this. However, when Umar ibn Khattab entered Jerusalem in the year 638, he cleansed this area, which was not used for 5 centuries, at least, since the time of Hadrian or even Titus in the year 70, cleansed this area and built a humble mosque the size of the Prophet's mosque in Medina. And then this was developed to a whole complex, including the whole site, rebuilding the whole of the walls, the gates, everything within this was reconstructed. Not just the Dome of the Rock, the whole area went through major reconstruction. And not just the area of the mosque. Since 1967, Israeli archaeologists have worked around this area, and all they have found, it was next to the mosque are the Umayyad palaces. And everything that you see today at the foundations of this wall and this area dates back to that particular period, with different Muslim dynasties adding different structures or renovating the first structures that were built from the early Muslim period. Within Islam, the first mosque is the Kaaba in Mecca, as mentioned in the Quran. Indeed, the first house of worship for humans is the one at Mecca. The second in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is that of Jerusalem, of Baytul Maqdis. And something quite interesting in terms of archaeology and architecture of this place is that both the Kaaba and Al-Aqsa resemble one another, the ancient form of the Kaaba. So today, the form of the Kaaba is a square, not perfect square or a cube. Yet before the prophethood of Muhammad ﷺ, and since the time of Abraham, this structure looked more like a rectangle. And looking at both of these, and this is the work of both a Palestinian archaeologist and architect, Dr. Haytham Aratrout, and basing it on the work of Creswell, who did excellent work on Islamic architecture, that the Kaaba and Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa resemble one another to in terms of ratio. Indeed, even the angles are exactly the same in both of these structures, and there is a whole article you can read on this by Dr. Haytham Al-Ratrout. But what is fascinating is the foundations of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, the foundations of this site were built before the 7th century. So according to archaeologists, British and Israeli archaeologists, these foundations date to the Roman period, yet the Romans always built all their structures on north-south axis. With the exception of this site, it is built in the direction of the Kaaba in Mecca. And this emphasizes that this is part of the Muslims do not believe that Solomon built a temple or Jesus prayed at a Jewish temple. Rather, this was a place of worship at a mosque. The meaning of mosque here is a place where one prostrates in front of God, so a place of making sujood, making prostration, and that applies even when you read the New Testament and the way Jesus would put his forehead on the ground, just like Muslims continue to do today. So this, the idea, and this is linked to an authentic hadith, both mentioned in tens of books of hadith, that the first mosque on earth, the first place of worship on earth is the Kaaba, Al-Masjid Al-Haram in Mecca. The second is Al-Aqsa, and between them are 40 years. The majority of Muslim scholars relate both of these structures to the first human. Some of them relate them to the time of Abraham, that Abraham rebuilt the Kaaba with his son Ishmael and rebuilt Al-Aqsa with his son Isaac. However, even within the Old Testament, when Abraham meets Malik Sadiq or Melki Sadiq, the one who and the story of him is interesting, that he was worshiping God the Most High. So the context that the people, when Abraham migrated to the Holy Land, the people there, many of them were actually in a state of monotheism. Jumping very quickly to the time, this is based on Madaba mosaic map, that the church, the city of Jerusalem, or Elia, at the time, or in the 7th century, the area of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa was derelict. It was not built. The main structures within the city were actually the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, built in the 4th century, and the Nia Church. We are talking about a very ancient history of Islam, and the Quran associates the majority of the prophets to this land. 25 prophets mentioned in the Quran, the majority of them are directly related with this land, starting with the first building, with the first human, then coming to the story of Abraham and Isaac and Yaqub and Joseph, and all these stories are mentioned within the Quranic context. Today, archaeology shows us that there's many civilizations who came even before the Canaanites, like the Natufians and the Kabaris and other cultures of people who were within this particular land and this particular period. And we know after Joseph and Jacob leave the Holy Land and head to Egypt, centuries later, Moses orders the children of Israel, or the children of Jacob, to enter the Holy Land, which God has ordered them to enter, yet they refuse to enter this land. So God forbids them from entering this land. This is all, I'm putting this within the Islamic Quranic timeline. So when we come now to the modern context, this is important. There is a very important already mentioned a few times in the beginning of the chapter 17 of the Quran, which is known as the chapter of the night journey, or the second name for it is the chapter of the children of Israel. And this verse is extremely important. Already the rabbi made some references to this verse, and also mine made references to it. That God ordained to the children of Israel that they shall cause in the scripture, that they shall cause mischief in the land twice, and they shall reach great heights. And then the Quran goes into the details of this. It mentions that twice the children of Israel in this land will cause mischief, but they will be at a state where they're causing mischief, but they will have great power. The first one is unanimously agreed upon by mostly all the Mufassirin, exegists in this, and they relate it to the time of Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BC. When he comes and he destroys. The Quran mentions this within this context. So when the time of the first of the two promises comes, are actually the Israelites. And this is now relating to both the past and coming to the future. And they say, and God says, we rose against you, our servants, your habitations, and it was a promise fulfilled. And then the verse continues, if you do good for yourself, and in أحسنتم أحسنتم لأنفسكم وإن promise comes, and this I will take a pause here. The second promise, exegists have on when this has taken place. The majority of classical Mufassirin have said that both of the promises have already passed before. However, modern exegetists mostly say that we are actually living through the second promise. And they qualify it by another verse mentioned in the Quran that mentions the ran us through some historical context. So here, not the first temple, but in the Muslim context, Sulaiman rebuilt Al-Aqsa Mosque. And the way it is described in the Old Testament is not how it is understood within the Muslim idea that Solomon, king and prophet, he rebuilt the mosque and prayed that whoever comes to visit this mosque would be cleansed from his sins like the day his mother gave birth to him. And this is mentioned in an of the Prophet Muhammad. After this, particularly, I'm skipping the time of Jesus because this is another topic, because the Quran gives a lot of details about the miraculous birth of Jesus and his prophethood and his crucifixion, saying that he wasn't crucified, but he was raised to the heavens. And that's how the Quran takes this idea, putting into the idea that he will return before the end of time. And many Christians and many of the people of the book will believe in Jesus before his death. But taking this, particularly after Jesus and the destruction of the city and for the establishment of the city of Elia over the city of Jerusalem by Hadrian in 129, and then in 132 he makes an order to expel all the Jews from this particular area, not just the city, but from Nablus in the north to Hebron and in the south, to Jericho in the east, and to Imwas in the west. And this was a decree that was continued by the Romans and continued by the first time, for the first time in history, Muslims, Jews, and Christians start living side by side. And this is based on a Quranic principle that I will come back to, which is called Lil Alameen, for all humanity, for all the world. And you see, until today, a Muslim comes every morning, opens the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and another comes and closes it at night. And this is the way Muslims and Christians and Jews lived side by side. And here, quoting Karen Armstrong, talking about this being the most peaceful and bloodless conquest ever in the history of Jerusalem. No expulsion, no burning of rival religious symbols, and no attempt to force the inhabitants to accept Islam. Muslims established a system that enabled Jews. The Jews were allowed under Umar ibn Khattab to come, and there's some Christians account that mention that the Christians did not want the Jews in the city, and Umar allowed 70 families to come from the north of Palestine and reside in the city for the for first time. And this inclusive Quranic concept, Lil Alameen, is mentioned in the Quran. When Abraham migrates to this land, God says, إِلَى الْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا الْعَالَمِينَ. The barakah, the blessing of this land is for all the worlds, not just for the Muslims, not just for the Christians, not just for the Jews. This is for the whole world to see the blessing of this land. And both the Muslims and the Christians and the Jews lived side by side for 1300 years, with the exception of the Crusade. The Crusades were 88 years of when the Crusaders entered the city. They killed tens of thousands inside Al-Aqsa Mosque. They burned the Jews in their synagogue, and even the British occupation in 1917, and then the Zionist occupation of Jerusalem in 1967, the eastern part of it particularly. And Al-Aqsa Mosque, there is this beautiful verse in the Quran: his places of worship and strive to destroy them. They shall not enter them except in a state of fear. And you see how the Zionists are storming Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, and I've been there when attacks have taken place inside Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. Guns, if this would happen in any other place in the world, the whole world would be outraged. When a synagogue was attacked in Paris a few years ago, the whole world leaders came and stood together. You can never justify an attack on a holy place, but you have seen the attacks on the Masjid Al-Aqsa every Ramadan for the last number of years, attacking people in the holiest month of Ramadan, in their holiest place of worship, and maiming and killing people within this. Coming to the second promise, we started with the first promise, and this is the second promise. The second promise is mentioned twice in Surah Al-Isra in chapter 17. I will start with the second mention of it. And we said to them, وَقُلْنَا مِنْ بَعْدِهِ لِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ, and we said to the children of Israel, after Moses and Pharaoh dwell in the land around the world, when the second promise comes, when the final promise prophecy comes, we shall bring you forth in one assembly or one gathering. And for centuries, the children of Israel have been dispersed around the whole world. And this is since over the last century, they have been gathered in this land. The second verse, this is verse 7. I will read verse 6 first. If you do good, you do it for yourself, and if you do not, then فَلَهَا, then you shall see the consequences. And when the second promise comes, we sent against you your enemies, and this is now addressing the Israelites, addressing the children of Israel, to shame your faces. So the first step for the liberation of this land from their injustice is to expose their faces and to shame their faces. لِيَسُوءُ وُجُوهَكُمْ. This is how the Quran describes it. And then they shall enter al-masjid, like they entered it the first time, and they shall destroy what they had taken over with total destruction. This is the main verse that within today, I've spoken to Muslim exegetists around the world, and the majority of them see that what we are living through today, because the verse number 6 actually explains that God increases the Israel in their number, and he makes them much more influential, and then he warns them, if you do good, you do it for yourself, and if you do evil, then it is going to be upon yourself. When the second promise comes, first they shall disgrace your faces, second they shall enter the mosque, the masjid, like they entered it the first time. And these are the two main points that are mentioned within this context. And what you see Israel today doing in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Syria, in Lebanon, is really putting them, exposing this real fascist Zionist agenda that you have seen. But this hasn't started today. We take this back to when this actually started, and the first one to propose to the Jews of Asia and Africa to gather under he established ancient Jerusalem for them was Napoleon in 1799. The British immediately took this idea after Napoleon failed, and particularly what we've been listening since the morning from many of the other speakers, particularly Rachel, on Christian Zionism. What we have seen is the British developing this initially. The first stage in the 1800s was to convert the Jews and send them off to to Palestine. So it's the London societies to Christianity. This project didn't see much success, with only a few exceptions. Then this project moved to another dimension. And this, one of the main figures in this were both Palmerston and Shaftesbury. And the way this was done, the British had no foothold in Palestine. So in order to create a foothold, they created the first Western consulate in Jerusalem. And Shaftesbury, he was actually anti-Semitic. He was against the Jews having the right to vote in UK, he wanted to send the Jews off to Palestine, and they tried to lobby the Ottomans to allow this to take place. Yet this failed, and this idea that today is being reflected by Biden, Trump, and others is actually from 1838, talking about an Anglicized Jewish colony in Palestine, strongly sympathetic to British interests and dependent on British aid. What we see is this Zionist, this is before Jewish Zionism. This is how this started, that today hearing Biden say, if there was not an Israel, we would have to invent one. You see this idea of taking the Jews to Palestine, creating a state for them, and the building of a temple on its site. Jerusalem becomes the focus of all of this, and the British played many games to get to this, using Arab nationalism, using Turkish nationalism, ending the Ottoman Khilafah, dividing this land, splitting it up into various different nation states that are dependent on the West. And this is something another important part that we learn from historical examples, that corrupt Muslim leaders are actually part of the problem. So you see today the Jordanians, the Emiratis, the Saudis, the Egyptians, and you see how they are complicit in this genocide that is taking place without ending. And these states, as Trump in his last term clearly mocked the king of Saudi Arabia, telling him, if we do not support you for 2 weeks, you would fall, and then making it 2 days and then 2 hours. And in a sense, actually, most of these states are dependent on made 3 different promises over Palestine, promised it to Sharif Hussein, promised it to an international zone in the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and promised it to the Jews within this land. After the occupation, the British occupation in 1917, Al-Aqsa comes back to the forefront again with the Barak Revolt, where Jews started claiming right over parts of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa Mosque, particularly Al-Barak Wall, the western wall of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. According to Jewish historical sources, the Jews before the Ottoman period never worshipped at this wall. This was in the post-Ottoman period, and there is a long discussion of how this took place. With the British now being there, they have someone to back them, and they tried to take over this part of the mosque. The League of Nations issued a report saying that the wall, everything that is in front of it, is Waqf property. It is an Islamic property, and the Jews, because the Muslims have allowed them since the end of the Ottoman period to worship at this place, then they are allowed with certain restrictions within this. But we see that this was the starting point for trying to claim ownership over the whole area of Al-Aqsa Mosque. We're moving from inclusivity, living side for centuries, now to exclusivity and losing all of this. You see the Israeli soldiers walking and driving inside Al-Aqsa Mosque in 1967, raising the Israeli flag over the Dome of the Rock. And this is a very interesting story that I would like to mention of Rabbi Shlomo Goren, who comes to Al-Barak Wall, blows the shofar, then enters the Dome of the Rock, and he suggests blowing up the Dome of the Rock and the whole of the area of Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the secular and the whole of the Muslim world against Israel. Yet Israel didn't stop to destroy all of the Muslim Waqf property of the Maghrib Quarter, hundreds of houses, madrasas, and completely wiping them out. In 1969, a Christian Zionist from Australia comes to Al-Aqsa Mosque. I witnessed this as a child because my father was teaching in Jerusalem, and we would go with him. The massacre inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque, killing tens of Palestinians. With Al-Aqsa, is a very dangerous statement. No Muslim who wishes to pray inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Even when Umar ibn Khattab, the second caliph, comes to Jerusalem, Sophronius invites him to pray inside the church. If I pray here, then the Muslims would lay claim over this area. I would not pray here. A mosque, and then he comes to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa and he rebuilds it. The only people that wish to pray inside Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, inside Al-Aqsa Mosque, are Jews. And this statement actually puts everything at risk. This has been used as a mosque for 1400 years, similar to what was discussed with the Indian case. This would turn everything upside down. Even when Yasser Arafat was offered by Yehud Barak to have the Muslims would have what is above the ground and the Jews would have what is under the ground, Yasser Arafat told the Americans and Yehud Barak that if we do this, this would be political suicide for me, and my people would not let me live. The reason is this place is a holy place, the holiest place for Muslims, and I cannot give an inch out of it. This is what is being suggested here is very dangerous and is exactly something that has happened in the Mosque of Abraham in Hebron, my city. In 1994, a Zionist Jewish extremist walks on people in the month of Ramadan, the mentor of or the godfather of Itamar bin Gavir. He walks into the mosque in the month of Ramadan and he kills tens of people while they are in prostration. He's a doctor, a medical doctor. He comes in, kills them. The Israeli closed the mosque for 6 months. When they reopen it, they open it with 60% to the Jews and 40% to Muslims. Not only that, they go even beyond that. In Jewish holidays, it is only for Jews to use this place. And this is taking a place that has been a mosque for centuries. But coming to Al-Aqsa, trying to apply the same thing, and this has been discussed in the Knesset many times, the idea of turning, and this would turn the whole region into a complete chaos, because this is not Israel just fighting the Palestinians. This is Israel taking on the whole of the 2 billion Muslims around the world. There is no difference to Muslims between the Kaaba and Al-Aqsa, both of them. And what I described, Al-Aqsa and the Jordanian government and the Palestinian PA have reiterated Al-Aqsa is the whole of the area. Israel tries to just make Al-Aqsa just one structure within this compound. The Muslims say, and the Palestinians say, Al-Aqsa is the whole of this, the whole of this area. What we have seen since the 7th of October with Israel Israel isn't fighting Gaza. Actually, this is a Western project. And when we talk about this as a Western project, the Jews are actually being used within this, this idea. What we have is, in terms of Christian Zionist, what was discussed earlier, and Stephen Sizer, in his book that was showcased earlier, he describes this actually in a lot of detail. This idea of building up or coming up to the destruction of Al-Aqsa and building a third temple for as a precursor to the second coming is extremely dangerous. He